It's the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog.
Welcome in, DawgNation. I am Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell, and it feels like I have been waiting a very, very long time to say that Georgia has finally landed a five-star running back commit, the number one running back in the entire country for 2027. Kemon Spell, if you've been with us over the last 2 years, you know that I am team run the dang ball. I have always emphasized that Georgia needed a five-star running back, and we finally get one, Jeff.
You know, Kaylee, we had a moniker for Brandon. He had a chortle when things went well for Georgia on the recruiting trail. I had some of our audience reach out to me and they said, is Kaylee on cloud nine right now? So this is probably a cloud nine Kaylee moment right now. And, you know, like our show says, folks, this is going to be a therapy session. It is okay. It is okay, DawgNation. Get the gusto going. It is okay to feel good about having the number one running back in the country, the undisputed number one in the 2027 class. It's okay. Let it out. Have fun.
I'm telling you, I've had this same smile on my face since Monday whenever the news broke. And listen, I understand that some people may not feel the same way. And of course, we're going to talk about that today. But this is a really good sign for the Dogs. I think that's the bigger picture in all of this. And the fact that Georgia was able to get him so early. I mean, listen, I know that you tried to convince me already that I needed to get that thought out of my head, but We've seen now miracles can happen.
Well, I think, Kaylee, there's a lot to talk about here, but I think the main thing is this. What if I told you that Georgia was going to pay the market rate or close to the market rate for the nation's number one running back? Then all of a sudden you get a little bit more excited. For all you golfers out there, Georgia and Mike Bobo's offense having a weapon like this is kind of like you getting that new driver or that new wedge that's going to save your short game a lot of strokes. You should just walk around the office or your house or the golf course this week, wherever it is, with a little bit more strut to your game, because this is going to make Georgia more dynamic and harder to stop in the future.
So my excitement, it can't be hidden, but I feel like maybe we're going to have to talk some people down off the ledge towards their feelings about the Kemon Spell situation. So that's going to be the basis of today's show, is that you're allowed to be excited. And here's why you should be, even if you have your doubts about Kemon Spell. Then after that, we're going to talk about the latest departure from Georgia's coaching staff and how does that impact Georgia recruiting when it comes to the edge and outside linebackers. Then we're going to look back at this past weekend, talk about some of the top target visitors from Georgia. And we're also going to have a conversation about one of the current Georgia commits. Jeff caught up with him. I thought he said something interesting. So we're going to go over that. Then we've got a DawgNation conversation with top safety target. That's the five-star Chance Gilbert. It's an exclusive interview that you're going to get to hear right here on Before the Hedges. And then, of course, a 2027 class breakdown, which now so much of the breakdown changes because Georgia gets Kemon Spell. So a lot of changes to the typical things that we do here on Wednesday night. But let's start with this. So Monday around lunchtime, the five-star running back Kemon Spell commits to Georgia. So Connor Riley and I immediately get together and we say, hey, we got to put something out on this. And, you know, I just wanted to monitor the general reaction from Georgia fans. So I went and looked at some of the comments under our video that's on YouTube if you haven't seen it already. There seems to be a general feeling that a lot of fans, it feels like it's just too good to be true. Here are just some examples. It says, I'll be excited if and when he's starting in the backfield. How are the last five stars working out for us? Rayola, Curtis, somebody else said, until he signs, I'll believe it. I just don't trust guys anymore to hold their commitments nowadays. We'll see. And then we had one more that says, until he signs on the dotted line, well, nothing ain't certain. And they mentioned other schools that come in typically later on, like Ohio State and Miami, that are willing to spend the big bucks. So I understand in this day and age of college football, nothing is set in stone until you sign on that paper. And even then, we've seen crazy things happen to where they can leave after that. But for me, this is a way bigger picture than just signing a five-star running back. It goes to show what you were talking about earlier, of the fact that Georgia's willing to spend big bucks on big players, which is a concern I feel like Georgia fans have had since the Sugar Bowl.
Kelly, I think, and first of all, that's pretty cool. North Hall dog. He's like trying to convince himself that he'll believe it when he sees it. But then the last thing he said, is he's like he looks pretty darn good on film. North Hell Dog, he looks great on film. And, I'm not really big about throwing around superlatives like manhole covers or something like that, but this is the number one running back in the country. And this stands to be, should he go on and sign, the highest rated running back prospect Georgia has ever signed. Go all the way back to Zamir White. He was the number 9 overall prospect. Well, Spell, who's just 16 years old, goodness gracious, he flashes this much ability being 16. He's been reportedly at 4.36 on a laser at Penn State. He is the modern day equivalent of a Herschel Walker type talent at running back. He is the number one guy. And the fact that Georgia has him, I think it bodes well. I think you're allowed to be excited about that. I mean, we've seen some gray skies a lot lately around the South because of all this winter weather. But guys, if this isn't something to get excited about, I don't know what is, because this is a game breaker type talent right here. He's basically been the man. He ran for 1,755 yards and 13 yards per carry last year, and he even missed 5 games. That's a 97-yard touchdown run right here, and it wasn't even his best run in the football game that night. That's a state semifinal game. You see some of the films. Kaylee, sometimes these defenses and these coordinators are playing their safeties 30 and 40 yards off the ball in order to prevent a big breakaway Kemon Spell run, kind of like it was a prevent defense for a Hail Mary late in the game. So this is a guy, when you know that Georgia's planning to pay, I think you can ramp up your I believe in Santa Claus feeling here a little bit, because this isn't the Easter Bunny. And one of the things that makes it so, I guess, opportunistic for Georgia fans to think about here, and no, we're not speeding up that video. Kaylee does not have her finger on the fast forward button there for Kemon Spell, but you can feel good about this because next year, Nate Frazier's supposed to go to the NFL. Kemon Spell, that would be his first year. Chauncey Bowens, I believe if he has a good year, he'll bolt to the NFL. So some of that money that's already in the room right now, the NIL money, the rev share money, that's going to come open, and you're going to have to pay a player like this. The other thing, Kaylee, I wholeheartedly believe that with the SEC going to 9 games, the emphasis on running the football, running the dang ball like you led the show with, Kaylee, that's going to be a premium. It's going to be optimal. So you need 2-3 really good backs in your stable, and Kemon Spell certainly is one of those.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the stats from his junior year, missed multiple games because of injury. He also added 32 rushing touchdowns on the year this season. He sits at 5'9", 205 pounds, so he's got the size and the speed, but the more that you watch his tape, I think the one thing that really stands out to me is also his pass catching abilities. We're seeing that a lot more now with running backs. You've got to have that versatility in your bag. Kemon Spell has got that, and you mentioned this earlier, highest rated running back signee that Georgia would ever had. He's actually the first 5-star running back commit since Zamir White back in 2018. So we look at Georgia like it's RBU, but there hasn't been a running back that's come through in a while that's given Georgia fans that feeling. And I feel like if they can hold on to Kemon Spell, he could be that guy.
I mean, really look at it, Kaylee. Look at the history books. Frazier is the only one that Georgia has signed that came to Georgia as a top 3 running back prospect in the country, dating all the way back to Zamir White. And then Zamir White's year, that was kind of spoiled because they brought in Zamir White, the number 3, and James Cook, the number 4 running back in the country. And then they had DeAndre Swift, also from Pennsylvania, the number 3 running back in the country in the 2017 class. So Georgia went giddy up and really just struck gold in the 17 and 18 classes, but not so much since then. I know folks are going to sit there and go, Jeff, wait a minute. Now hold on just a darn minute. There was Zachary Evans, but he signed, but he never enrolled at Georgia. He was the number 1, number 2, number 3 running back in the country way back in 2020 as well. So this is kind of rare air for Georgia to go out and grab a back of this caliber and to do it early. And Kaylee, the other thing to think about is Kemon has already kind of done that play with your heart type thing. And I think that's what I mean by that is he was committed to Penn State. That was the in-state school that prioritized him. But then James Franklin got fired. So I think that decision has shaped what he's looking for. He wants to be around a program that wins, a program that will develop him. And Georgia is a place to do that. Georgia came into the visit for Junior Day as the leader, and then Georgia closed that thing down, which is saying something how they were able to lock him down this early. And most people, Kaylee, that were with him on the visit knew that this was eventually going to happen. That's what his player peers that were on the trip with him were telling me.
All right, so Jeff and I could sit here and talk to you for another 30 minutes about all the reasons that you should be excited about Kemon Spell, but I actually think it's best heard from somebody who gets to see him on an everyday basis. That's going to be his coach, Matt Miller. So let's hear from Matt Miller on why Georgia fans should be excited about the 5-star running back.
Something I've never seen before. We've had a couple guys in the NFL. I played with a guy that did 11 years, ended his career with the Steelers. I mean, he was dynamic, and Kemon was able to do all those things as a freshman. I just never seen anyone that young that was able to, take over a football game against rival opponents. So he's a real big personality, big smile on his face. But man, when it's the lights turn on, he gets real serious about his game, and he's something special. Yeah, he's one of them guys that they're going to be playing, big games, obviously, with you guys next year or 2 years from now. But yeah, most likely a Sunday type performer. I mean, I just never seen anybody that no matter what the competition is, he's always seems to be the best guy on the field.
What do you think motivates him, Coach?
I think he loves the game. I think he wants to be great. Been around a couple people that, they're not just thinking about, trying to go to college. They're thinking about trying to be one of the better players ever. And I think he has that greatness quality to him that not everybody has, and I've never seen where the situation was too big for him. And he seems like he's able to handle the pressure, and then he's able to perform in the big moments.
Coach, what is he like off the field? Because I see he's already speaking to middle schoolers and everything else like that. Like, he seems like the perfect ambassador for any program, much less the ability here.
Oh, definitely. He's like somebody who's going to walk in a room. First time you meet him, he's going to have a smile ear to ear. He's going to greet you with a big handshake or a hug and, light up the room. I mean, he has a big electric personality, and, he's actually a better person than he is, even a football player, so I think he's going to be real popular down in Georgia and anywhere else that gets to see him play.
So obviously Coach Miller lists all the things that Georgia fans should be excited about when it comes to the things on the field. But Jeff, you do such a good job of talking about why with the players. Why do you play football? What's the intangible thing about Kemon Spell that Georgia fans should be thrilled for?
I think the thing that people close to him have told me over the last couple of days as I've tried to fill my knowledge funnel with everything possible about Kemon Spell is this is a guy that just doesn't want to get to college football. He's a guy that wants to be known as one of the best ever to do it. And he works like that and he trains like that. He finished last year, Kaylee, actually up to like 215, according to his coach. And he's about 5'10-ish right now, maybe a little bit closer to 5'11. And again, he's been timed at 4.36 electronically. Again, Kaylee, he's just 16. He turned 17 in April, so he will get to Athens as a 17-year-old. I know there's a lot of redshirt eighth graders and a lot of redshirt kindergartners that are up on those top 50 lists of overall prospects. This is not one of those guys. And Kaylee, he also plays on the defensive side. He had 3 interceptions last year as a corner or a deep safety. And you think about what he could have done last year if he hadn't missed 5 games due to kind of a freak ankle fracture. And look at him. He's a contact seeker. The contact balance there is really good. And the main thing Coach Miller said that makes him so elite is he can get to 5th gear and he can make cuts without having to slow down. And when Kaylee, that's a great trait for a running back. But when that 5th gear is 4.3 speed, that's special.
All right. So one last thing before we move on, I think it's important to address head on the concerns that a lot of Georgia fans had, and that's the fact that it looks like Spell is going to continue to take visits elsewhere. So, why should they maybe hold off on that hesitancy, even though he's going to go see other schools in the future?
Be interesting to see how many he goes to see, because right now, Kaylee, he can't go anywhere for the month of February. That's a dead month for face-to-face or on-campus recruiting. I know he's part of the California Power 7-on-7 organization, and that means he's going to go to places like Houston, Las Vegas. He's going to be pretty busy with that entity over the next month or so. And, ironically, there's a lot of Georgia commits or Georgia major targets like Brock Williams, like Jaden Aparicio-Bailey that are on those Cali Power teams as well. So he's got to know those guys a lot. And I think it really looms large here, Kaylee, is when he decommitted from Penn State, he didn't have Penn State among his new top 5 schools. And Notre Dame was the school that he also took a really good look at. Now, a lot of Notre Dame fans, a lot of Penn State fans are not very happy with this situation. And they're telling Georgia fans, just you wait. He's going to get you. Like, he got the excitement and the pulse rates up out of a lot of those fan bases. But Katie, I'll tell you one other thing it does. All the prospects I'm talking to now, I feel like it's galvanized Georgia a little bit. Georgia's like that hot team on the trail again because they have a player like that. And guys want to play with a player like Kemon Spell.
So obviously that was the big news that came out of the visits that took place last weekend. We're going to go back and talk about some other visitors as well as catch up with a recruit who is already a part of the class. We'll also have an exclusive DawgNation conversation with the 5-star safety, Chance Gilbert, among some other things. Before we talk about the most recent coaching change, I want to give a huge shout out to Kroger, who has been such a big help, at least to me, over the last couple of weeks with everything that's been going on with the weather. I've been really making use of my Kroger Boost. The best part about Kroger Boost, on top of double the fuel points, is that you also get those groceries delivered straight to your doorstep. Just looking at the day now, February 4th, we're about to get into rain season here in just a little bit, where it's going to be raining every single day, just to make it a little bit easier on yourself, maximize time for you and your family. Make it easy by signing up for Kroger.com/boost. You can try free for 30 days. So last night we find out that Georgia outside linebacker coach Chidera Uzo-Diribe is going to be leaving for the Cowboys, the second departure this year after Stacey Searles. Now, looking at this 2027 class, there are no edges or outside linebackers currently committed, but there is a ton of edges and outside linebackers on the top targets list. So is Georgia taking a big hit here by losing Uzo-Diribe at this point in time, or can Georgia make up for that because it is so early in the cycle still?
I think it's a good timing for Georgia to kind of offset a lot of this. And the other thing, Kaylee, is the big names that they were supposed to be chasing in 2027 are not there. DJ Jacobs commits early to Ohio State, huge rev share number there involved. And then you have a guy like LaDainian Guyton, who was supposed to be in this class, reclassified to 2026. He's a Texas Tech Red Raider right now. And then like KJ Green, it doesn't seem like Georgia is really in there with the in-state guy. I will say this, Kamari Brooks was very saddened. He even had that very sad down face, rainy day face emoji on his Instagram story reacting to Coach Uzo heading to the NFL. But Kaylee, this is one of those things where if you've got a good program, you've got great coaches, they're going to get poached, especially a guy like Coach Uzo, who to me seems like a future coordinator at the NFL level or a future head coach at the NFL level if he wants it. He's very bright. He's very personal and engaging, and he's a great communicator. And he also loves ball, and he's a former player. And he's obviously been around the Georgia program for 4 or 5 years now and seen the way you should do it. I think what it does, Kaylee, is it opens up another shot for Georgia to find that hot new name, that edge coach. I know a lot of speculation is like, will Jarvis Jones stop winning state championships at Carver Columbus and come back home and coach the edge position? Or will Georgia go after an alum like Christian Robinson, who played at Georgia and has spent the last few years at places like Alabama and Florida in the SEC coaching the outside linebackers?
So one thing I can't help but wonder is, does Georgia take the Georgia Tech approach where they go get somebody from the Georgia high school coaching ranks? Because a lot of the edge targets that they're recruiting are in-state, and I feel like if you go out and get an in-state coach, then you're already having those predetermined relationships that have been cultivated here in the state of Georgia. So, I feel like Georgia does a pretty good job of mitigating these situations really quick, but I can't help but wonder if maybe the best routes for them to pull somebody from Georgia high school football.
Well, they pulled Uzo when he was pretty young. He was actually on a couple of staffs, Colorado staff, the TCU staff. I would say with Uzo, what you could get there is you could try to find one of those, up and comers. Kaylee, I know this for a fact. Kirby Smart has a short list at every position. If one of his top assistants gets poached or gets an upward movement type position like Uzo-Diribe is getting here going to the Cowboys, I'm sure he's always got a short list of 2 or 3 names he'd love to have come join his team and his program between the hedges in Athens. You get an in-state guy with a lot of connections that can help, especially perhaps if he's connected to a player as well, because then those rules no longer apply about if you take a job, on-field job in college, well, then the players that you were used to coach in high school are fair game as long as you're an on-field coach and not a analyst or a support role.
So clearly we're talking about this from the recruiting perspective, but if you haven't already, I would encourage you to go back and watch this morning's episode of DawgNation Daily, where Brandon talked about this in depth and how this next hire could potentially impact Georgia this upcoming season. So go make sure to check out DawgNation Daily this morning. Also, one other thing, we are getting closer and closer to our DawgNation cruise. You know that DawgNation, Georgia football is the number one topic for us here every single day. But for 1 week in 2026, we are taking that conversation to the high seas. And thanks to our friends at Kroger, you can join me, the entire DawgNation team, including Jeff, and the best fans in the world on our 2026 cruise aboard Utopia of the Seas. And the coolest part about it is it's super easy to enter the giveaway. All you have to do is go to DawgNation.com/contest right now and tell us your favorite memory from the Kirby Smart era. So that's going to end on February 13th. So go ahead, make sure to get those memories in now. That way you can join us aboard Utopia of the Seas with DawgNation. So shout out to Kroger for giving somebody an amazing opportunity to come on the DawgNation cruise with us. So, Jeff, I didn't get the chance to hang out with you last week, but I still got the chance to watch a little bit of the show. Right now, we are in primetime visitor season, and I know some of the early visitor weekends were maybe the, not ranked low 3-star guys that Georgia wanted to be the first ones to show love to. But now we are in the part where they are hosting the 4 stars. They are hosting the 5 stars. We already talked about the Kemon Spell news. Were there any other headlines that came out of last weekend's visitors list?
Yeah, Kaylee, tons. First of all, let me see if I can go down last week's top targets list for basically to make the point pretty clear. Number 1 offensive tackle Joshua Sam-Appel made it on the Friday before the Athens Snowmageddon. He was there with Douglas County High School teammates Adrian Cole and Justin Weeks. Justin Weeks just moving over from Pace Academy recently. That was a good visit. Brock Williams, the nation's number 2 tight end, he was also in. And Kaylee, it sounds like Georgia punched the momentum card there a lot with Brock. Really felt the love in terms of just kind of hanging out with current tight ends like Lawson Lucky, but also, getting a chance to do the campus side of things where he'd kind of checked most of the football related stuff off. He had family members with him, and, Georgia seems very poised in a race with Texas and Ohio State to potentially win that recruitment and also win it in a couple of months, maybe, if not even sooner than that. Lots of storylines. They had the number 1 offensive tackle in the country in Kaylee. That was Mark Matthews out of St. Thomas Aquinas. By all accounts, I've been told he had a great visit. It's one of those that I think Georgia's going to be in the mix for, but that one's going to get very price point conscious with Miami looming in his backyard as well. But there's a lot of names. There was so many cool stories that came out last week with the viral moments with Kirby Smart holding a young prospect's little brother who was only 2.5 years old. He did that because Dabo also held the kid. So he had to keep up in the arms race there with having the swaddling baby in your arms. So a lot of stuff going on last week, Kaylee.
A swaddling baby. I could just see that scene happening in my head as you said that. Of course, a Wedding Crashers reference if you've never seen the movie. Well, that was pretty surprising. I wasn't expecting that from you. Speaking of surprises, was the Kemon Spell thing the biggest surprise that came out of this last visitors weekend for you? Or was there maybe something else you were like, whoa, okay, definitely need to take note of that?
Well, a couple of things. Number 1, it validated a lot of things that you were hearing about Kemon. And one of the things, the visit went well. He was loving Georgia. Everybody was telling me that was there, watch, that guy's going to be a dog. the fact that Kirby had a Kang moment, as people on our boards and all of our viewers like to say, he got him committed before he left. Actually, he made the commitment before he left, I was told. So that was something that he went public with it as well. And he said, I'm home. That's got to be the big story, the top story. And it's also interesting how Georgia was able to extend the goodwill with a guy like Amari Patterson, the guy that we profiled last week, who has ridiculous tape. I want to tell you, Kaylee, something organic happened there last weekend when Nate Frazier was hosting Kemon Spell, but then also Dante Wright was there, the 5-star cornerback out of California. And gosh, Oregon is really trying to pull him away from Georgia and pry him away from Georgia. But then Amari was there, and they just kind of vibed and they just kind of chilled. Kaylee, it's one of those things where we might want to look back on when we tell the full story of the 2027 class about just how big it was. Like Dante was kidding. He was like, man, we had all had our puffer jackets on because we're from California and we're not used to this weather at all. And then like Kemon's just got a regular jacket on. It's like it's the Tuesday jacket because he was not fazed by the cold at all.
Well, speaking of Dante Wright, he was one of the commits who did visit Junior Day. And in one of your articles on DawgNation.com, he spoke about how Georgia is still in his top 2, even though he's a commit. And it's almost giving shades of Mark Bowman, where I feel like Georgia fans now are going to be like, keep the California kids out. We know what happens. But should Georgia fans still be optimistic about Dante Wright, or is there real concern there?
So it's really weird, Kaylee, and I know people saw that story and they've remarked to me and they've started hemming and hawing and, kind of had their, oh my gosh, it's totally different right now. But I've got to give credit to Dante for giving a kind of a genuine, sincere answer. And what it means, Kaylee, is like, listen, what does commitment mean anymore? Is that the school they like the most where they want to lock down a spot? I think that's what it means, rather that they're committed and ignoring and ghosting every other text from every other school. Dante might have said, he said the visit to Georgia enhanced his commitment. He built a great relationship there with Kirby Smart, and he learned a little bit more from Kirby firsthand about how much they want him and need him and how much he's a priority. But then he also says, well, there's 2 schools at the top, and that is Oregon and Georgia. But then you ask him about his weekend, and he is openly recruiting for Georgia that weekend, like he is the most steadfast commit. And he basically told me he wants to play with Kemon Spell. And then he also wants to make sure there's a lot of players with him because he wants to win his own natty while he's in Athens at Georgia. It was almost sound like he was trying to be political and very pleasing with all of his statements, but then everything he said, and then he described his actions. It may not sounded like a commitment, but he acted like a commitment. And then when I asked him, I was like, all right, man, Kemon committed. This is what you told me. You said Kemon's commitment would make a difference. And then he said, yeah, Georgia's still at the top for me now because he really wants to play with him. And that's a very big deal for sure. And, you just got to take the young man at his word. Obviously, Oregon is trying like the darndest to pull him away, but Georgia improved its chances of holding on to Dante Wright because of that vibe that those young men had together this weekend in Athens while they try to stay out of the snow.
Wait, so is it just a matter of the connection that they built during the weekend? Or, we've got one who's from Pennsylvania, one who's from California. So why would Dante Wright be so dead set on playing with Kemon Spell?
Because he knows him. And I believe those 2 guys have been to the same 7-on-7 events. And Dante was like, listen, man, I not only watched his film, I watched it a few times. And those guys were hanging out. Dante showed me some pictures of their campus life together. And it sounded like a really big bond there was formed, not only because Frazier was there as well, another California guy. So, Kaylee, not all the California guys drift away from Athens. Sometimes that dog stays at home in Athens, but I just feel like, it's very hard for a 5-star these days, especially a guy on the other coast. He was very honest. One of the things he told me, Kaylee, is he said his mother made the trip with him to Athens for the first time. And one of the things that she said to him is she said, son, I feel bad for you because this is such a hard decision, choosing from a place like Georgia and choosing from a place like Oregon, that she said she wouldn't want to be in his shoes, but you got to look for those little things and those little reasons why Dante Wright would remain a dog. And I think Georgia gave him a lot more reasons for him to remain a dog right now. And the other thing he said, Kaylee, is development is chief among his concerns about college football. And he still believes Georgia develops the cornerback position as well as anybody in the country. He shouted out Kamari Lassiter for how well he developed at Georgia. And now Kamari is a Pro Bowler and one of the elite corners in the league.
Yeah, so Dante Wright currently the only commit for Georgia's defense in 2027. In just a second, we're going to hear from a top defensive target, another 5-star. This one's going to be safety Chance Gilbert. But before we do that, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, it's myself, Connor Riley, Cody Chaffins for DawgNation at Large. We talked a lot about what to expect or maybe what not to expect out of Georgia's wide receiver room for this upcoming season. And then we did those way too early breakout stars. So we get to have some fun with that and also discuss some alternate things that Georgia can do for a spring game this year to still have that player fan interaction. So that's going to be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We hope to see you there. All right, so I feel like we've talked a lot about the 5-star safety, Chance Gilbert, on this show. He's an in-state player. It feels like a guy that Georgia absolutely has to have. He would complement a lot of the players that are already on Georgia's defense, and I feel like he really fits the mold for some of the great safeties that we've seen in the past. We're going to get a chance to hear from him in just a second, but before we do that, Jeff, what's the one thing that people should pay attention to in this conversation?
So Georgia was his only junior day visit he took. He has what I would call, Kaylee, a soft top 4, and I'm not trying to get you to roll your eyes, but it really just 3 schools. It's Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia. And there's really one thing about each of the schools that really stands out about him. I'll let him describe it to you in this conversation. But Kaylee, he's got elite speed. He was an Under Armour All-American. He's had shoulder surgery in the offseason. He wasn't able to play in the Under Armour All-American game, but a lot of people see him as a versatile defensive back, Kaylee. He has elite speed. He's a 10.5, 10.6 type guy in the 100 meters. You can obviously see him pick him up and put him down right there across the field. But, he's a guy that he wants to stay close to home. The family thing is very real for him and his mother. And he's always said that it's kind of funny, kind of refreshing, Kaylee, that he's always had the same top 3, top 4 schools forever. And they've all been in the Southeast footprint.
All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and take a listen. This is Chance Gilbert on what he likes about Georgia.
Chance, man, recently visited Georgia. Georgia was your only junior day this month. What's the big takeaway from that? Like, what sticks in your mind about Georgia?
The one thing that stands out is they don't show favoritism, and they start all of their freshmen. That's the number one thing I love about Georgia.
Seems like they're talking about a lot of roles. You could be a corner, you could be a safety. That would be early ways to get on the field. How do you feel about maybe being a corner in college football?
I mean, wherever the coaches want me is where I would play. They want me at corner, I play corner. They want me at safety, I play safety. Because both of those positions is the number one positions I want to play at.
What was the big message that Georgia left you with?
That they will develop me and take care of me. Like I said, they don't show favoritism. They got the most started freshmen in the SEC or throughout their years. So if you're good, they'll start you. That's what I love about them. What's your relationship like with Coach Dante? It's actually great. He's speaking to me like he knew me for years. It's great. So and especially Coach T-Rob, they make me comfortable. And they actually helped me be bold, because when we was there, we was playing this game called Family Feud, and we would step on the stage and answer questions about Georgia. So, yeah, they helped me to, speak in front of people too, which is something I'm gonna get used to. I'm pretty much used to right now, but yeah, that was pretty cool. It's not just Georgia though. There's Alabama, the Dream School Alabama. There's Clemson. What do you like the best about Clemson first? The faith there. If I go to Clemson, I feel like I'll get along with pretty much everybody, and it'll help me grow in my faith spiritually, help me mentally, and yeah, that's the number one thing about Clemson I love. How about Alabama? What's the number one thing about Alabama that's
has them a contender for you?
Just a school I've liked all my life, and the whole entire staff I click with them, the whole entire staff. And then also, I mentioned this, Alabama, the coach, he was saying how they want me to play all 5 positions for DB. They think I could move around, they could use me. So that definitely stands out. They would play me at nickel. They let me guard in the slot if they need me to, guard the best person there. And they'll let me play wide out DB.
It seems to me, listening to you, it seems like one school has one big check. Like Clemson's probably the biggest faith check.
Yep.
Georgia might be the biggest development check, and then Alabama might be maybe where your heart used to be, where your roots are at, and then maybe variety of worth to you. I mean, does it feel like every school's got one big thing to look for right now?
Yes, sir. Everything you just said, definitely, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chance Gilbert, big decision coming up, I guess, this summer. He's got some official visits. He's got to get healthy, get those shoulders really strong. Hey, Chance, always appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
So you asked him about how would you feel if Georgia moved you to corner? And we just had this whole conversation about cornerback Dante Wright, who still feels like he's in between 2 schools. If Chance Gilbert were to commit to Georgia and they commit him to being a corner, would that impact Dante Wright's decision at all?
I don't think it would. I like the question, though, but like Georgia's going to try to hoard corners a little bit in this class, especially since Chance is rated as a safety. Chance was the big visitor of the junior day, January 17th junior day. He was the big in-state guy. He got a lot of attention from Coach Dante Williams. And one of the things, as you guys heard in that video, he's really impressed by Georgia put the stats in front of him about how many freshmen play and how quickly they play. And that really captured him. He had a conversation with Dante, and he's like, man, your defense looks really complex. And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. I'm a coach. I will break it down to you and coach you and how you can put it together so you can play really fast and really effectively. And Kaylee, one of the things we got to say here is that I know sometimes we internally look at the position coaches and how well they're doing. It seems to me that Dante Williams has really increased his stock on the Georgia staff, not just with a guy like Chance Gilbert or not just with a guy like obviously Dante Wright, but like, you know, the young men he knew when he recruited them when he was at USC. That's the 5-star Gentry Williams. That's Braylon Coley, the other guy that came in from USC through the transfer portal as well. He's really kind of putting his own footprint across Georgia's secondary a little bit, especially with these big-time guys.
So for Chance Gilbert, he's been on the radar for a while now. You said he's really down to 3 schools. Do you expect that decision to come sooner or later?
It's going to come in the middle of the summer, Kaylee, when it should be expected to happen. And, you know, to me, if I was an odds maker right now, I would say it's probably Alabama and then Georgia, because Alabama just has got a plan with him about how they're going to play him all over. Georgia said that he can play cornerback. Like one of the things Dante Williams told him is he can play corner for us. And that's great. That's great with everything else. The one thing that gives me pause about Chance Gilbert and the Dogs, and there's a young man I mentioned earlier with our swaddling soundbite that got you laughing a little bit, Jaden Aparicio-Bailey. He just took his 5th visit to Georgia last weekend, and it was a huge one. He had mom there. He had his stepfather there. He had his 2.5-month-old younger brother there with him as well. And Kaylee, they've told him he could be a corner when most of the state actually sees most of the state of the college football recruiting industry right now sees him as a safety. Also, he may be in Alabama, he may be in Montgomery, but he's from California, another Cali kid. And what Dante Williams is a guy that knows how to recruit those California defensive backs, and he's proving that in this cycle for sure.
I think a lot of the things that you just talked about are going to be summed up when we do our top targets later, because you can kind of see some of the movement that reflects the cornerback. So we'll get to that. We're also going to talk about, I kind of want to just keep it a surprise until we get there. So really quick, I want to ask you guys, if you're here watching with us, just go ahead and like this video. And while you're on our channel, if you'll subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page. There's going to be a little bell right next to subscribe. If you hit that button, then you'll get notified anytime that DawgNation posts content, like when the Kemon Spell news broke on Monday. And then also we're getting closer and closer to draft coverage. So it's a good way to keep up with all things Georgia football and keep up with the guys who are going to be moving on to the next level. Well, Jeff, we've made it through the whole show, and I haven't even wished you a happy signing day yet. And I know it's hard to believe that it's signing day. The reason that we figured it out, or at least that I knew, is because Georgia adds a late 2026 commit, a 5-star long snapper in Colton Dermer. So happy signing day to you. Georgia puts out a tweet of their own. The stage is set. Welcome to Athens. Colton Dermer out of Glendale, Arizona.
Kaylee, I'm telling you, this is not to sound like we're going in the Wayback Machine, like some of the other parental figures in your life when they say like back in the day or back in the day. You don't know.
I remember it.
Kaylee, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit. You were just ready to be like in Swainsboro, Georgia, Moultrie, Georgia, and then Valdosta on a 3 signing day tour where I'm in the other part of the state and we're canvassing and there are big booms going on off and on. Let me tell you about Mr. Dermer. It has been reported that he is a full scholarship guy. You know, that's possible now in the 105, where, 105 that's the number now that it absorbs the walk-ons now as well, except for the ones that are grandfathered in. But there's an interesting story here with Mr. Dermer. I know people online were like, oh my gosh, they're really 5-star long snappers. Well, not for the national services. 24/7 Sports, Rivals, ESPN, they don't rank long snappers. I mean, the greatest long snapper or kicker in the history of the world is still going to be a 3-star by those services. But the individual sites like the individual Chris Rubio long snapping and, all the other ones that rank specialists have Dermer as a 5-star. But it's a neat little voyage for him to get to Athens. Here's what I mean by that. He signs with Michigan during the early period, but obviously when the early period rolled around, there was the instances which the episodes with Sharon Moore, and they have a new coach and a new coaching staff now. And the new regime at Michigan decided they didn't need a scholarship long snapper in the class of 2026. So they released him from that letter of intent, from that scholarship bind. And here comes Georgia. They swoop him in and they get one of the top long snapping talents of the last couple of years, especially for that pop time and how quickly he gets the ball back to the punter and gets the ball back to the kicker. That's a big deal, and that's why he's got those verified metrics that earn that 5-star ranking.
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that, because that was going to be one of my questions to you is, people freak out over 5 stars, but I feel like if you see 5-star long snapper, you're just like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, but you're maybe not as excited about it as a skill player. So can you gauge just how big of a deal this is and maybe how the evaluation process looks for a position like that in order to get a 5-star?
Yeah, so it's a lot of these camps are very dialed in, and they have the same way that baseball scouts have a pop time with getting the ball from the catcher's position to second base in terms of trying to thwart opponents on the bases. Well, that's how they get their stopwatches out, and they measure the pop time for a center for the snapper to get the ball back to his holder or get the ball back to his punter. And this guy, Colton, out of Arizona, great part of Arizona. He's from the Gilbert area right there, right outside Phoenix, in that Scottsdale type area right there. He's a guy that is an absolute dude in the snapping world. And that's one of those things that was verified. Georgia had brought him in and worked him out a lot. And it's a way for them to add a lot of value there with a snapper. And it's kind of the world we live in, Kaylee, where the big national signing day news on the first Wednesday of February is a 5-star, but it's a long snapper. That just shows you these times are changing.
Do you think that it is safe to say that after this, no more 2026 news?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm going to reverse that, Kaylee. I'm going to reverse that. As you might imagine, Georgia's class of 2026 is not complete. They are still waiting on the status of one Chase Calicut, the young man out of Houston who saw those serious charges that were levied against him dropped. And now, according to my information, it's a matter of Georgia's administration, Georgia enrollment, approving him at his enrollment. But I also believe that stuff has to go through the conference as well. That also has to go through the SEC. So I think there's definitely an evaluation period right now to find out whether Chase Calicut becomes a Bulldog. So that might be the last story of the news cycle for the 2026 class. And Kaylee, that could take a while. I mean, he could probably, since classes have already started, drop ad has already happened. I think you might not hear any finality on Chase Calicut until maybe May or June.
All right, so let's wrap up 2026. Let's move on to 2027s, which Kemon Spell changes a lot for our class breakdown. Of course, starting with the offensive side of the ball, you get a 5-star running back. You add him in with Noah Parker. And of course, you have not been shy about telling us that a 5-star running back costs a lot of money. So does the money that they are going to have to pay Kemon Spell, does that impact any other position group in the offense because it is an expensive position?
I think it does. I think it maybe affects what they're going to do with trying to get 2 of those high-priced offensive tackles. Kelsey Adams is already one of the top 5 offensive tackles in the country. You heard me earlier in the show mention Mark Matthews. There's also Joshua Sam Appel out there looming as well. I think one of the things Kemon Spell does, and I'm glad you asked that question because it's a bridge to this nugget. Mm-hmm. I think it makes things a little bit more complicated or cloudy with Andrew Beard. And Andrew Beard, the very talented, productive back out of Prince Avenue Christian, the nephew of Garrison Hurst. I know a lot of people had eventually pegged him to be a Bulldog. Well, Andrew has told me recently that Tennessee was his leader, not the Dogs. And he actually spent the last Junior Day weekend of January in Indiana, Kaylee. How about that? So if I was Beard in his camp, I would kind of look at Georgia and go, all right, probably not going to be the featured guy there anymore in this class. And maybe that's why he needs to look around during this time. But I think most Dog fans would probably take that trade because, Andrew is a phenomenal player, but I think he's around the number 4, number 5, number 6 back in the country. And then you got Kemon Spell, who is a true difference maker and a true kind of plug and play instant impact freshman.
So now let's go to the defensive side of the ball. We can tie this back in with Uzo-Diribe. So no edge prospects on this. Who is the one edge prospect that you feel like Georgia really needs to lock in on their relationship with now that Diribe is gone?
It's an interesting one, Kaylee. This is a young man named PB Ransom out of the state of South Carolina. Now, he was feeling Georgia. His name's Peyton Ransom, but he was feeling Georgia already. And this is one of those non-ranked guys, Kaylee, one of those guys that Georgia has already evaluated and targeted and started to prioritize. He was already loving Georgia and the relationship that he was building with Coach Diribe prior to his Junior Day visit this weekend. And he said coming out of his Junior Day that he was extremely high on Georgia. I think now this is a little bit of a level set with Ransom and Georgia now because he needs to know who his position coach is going to be. But Kaylee, I checked that film on Ransom. That's why I reached out to him as soon as he started to gain some traction, according to my sources. Kaylee, he had, get this, 16 sacks last year. That's pretty good. 21 tackles. 21 tackles for losses. That's pretty good. Over 100 tackles for an edge. That's very good. But Kaylee, not only have those 16 sacks, he had 79 hurries. Think about that for a second.
Wow.
79. That's 80, almost 80 other opportunities where he was, the definition of the stat of a hurry is somebody that affects the quarterback and causes him to speed up his decision-making. And for him to be around the passer that much, I talked to him about it, man. He's like, it's kind of like a love-hate relationship where he's happy to have the 16 sacks and all those plays, but like there's so many sacks he could have had. He said he was like a fingernails close to having like 35 sacks last year.
All right. Now let's go on to our snapshot. And obviously with Spell coming in, Georgia moves up in the class rank. I just want to get like a preseason prediction from you. When we're having this conversation again in December, Jeff, where do you think that Georgia will be ranked nationally?
I think they'll probably be top 4, top 5. I think it's just going to be really hard. Again, what Georgia's not going to have in this class, I don't believe, is a 5-star quarterback unless Jaden Wade reclassifies to the 2027 class. And then all of a sudden, I know Dog fans sometimes want to always look at the negative, and that's fine, but maybe we should trumpet the fact a little bit more, and maybe that's what our job as stewards of Before the Hedges and talking to all these Dog fans every Wednesday night about recruiting. I don't know how many times Georgia has had the number one quarterback in the country and the number one running back in the country committed. That's something to celebrate right there. The last time, you got to go all the way back a long ways, because it was never Zamir White with Justin Fields, because Trevor Lawrence for the longest time was actually the number one quarterback in that class. And Justin was usually 1A, 1B, or number 2. So that's rare air, Dog fans. Everybody that wonders about the offense and they say Kirby's got the defense, for them to have the number one running back in the country committed and the number one quarterback, albeit for the 2028 cycle, they're doing some recruiting there in Athens still, as much as everybody thinks it's all about rev share and bags and NIL these days.
All right, now we're going to get into our top targets. And I told you we would circle back around to some of these guys, and I feel like it's very telling. You see Andrew Beard go from the top 5 to last. So the Kemon Spell situation, that hurts. I want to ask you about the 4-star safety. Kamori Dorsey, though, an in-state guy committed to Texas A&M. I feel like it's really early in the cycle for you to start putting names on this list who are already committed to other schools. So what intel do you have between for the relationship between Dorsey and Georgia?
Here's one thing that I know Georgia wants in this class, Kaylee. They want a safety that will smack you, like one of those Mack truck type, punishing type hitters, those Greg Blues, those Thomas Davises. Dorsey fits that to a T. Now, he was scheduled to be in Athens. He was going to be in Athens for that last junior day. He didn't make it. I'm sure that's something that Texas A&M is trying to finagle on its end right there. But he's that one guy Georgia's targeting. There's also Tayshaun Poole out of Macon that they're looking at the safety position, besides a lot of other guys that are really high on this board. And I think he's kind of my best choice right now for that physical enforcer that Georgia likes to have in every class, especially at safety.
All right, so now we'll move on to 6 through 10. You briefly mentioned Chance Gilbert, and I was very shocked to see him move outside of the top 5 because I feel like he's been sitting there for a while. So clearly you feel strongly that maybe that relationship is not as strong as we thought. But I want to ask you about him and also the 3-star interior offensive lineman, Elijah Morrison. I know you said that the Spell money would more so impact the offensive tackles, but does that apply to the interior offensive lineman as well?
I don't think so. Those guys aren't commanding the premium on the rev share figures that the tackles are. The premium positions are the same ones the NFL wants to see: the quarterbacks, the offensive tackles, the pass rushers, and even some cornerbacks. You know, those guys that are always around the play, always touching the ball or protecting or intimidating the guys that's always touching the ball. You know, one thing I will note, Kaylee, I think our audience needs to hear is on the top targets, the previous slide, I will note that MJ Burnett, the son of Morgan Burnett, the Georgia Tech Hall of Famer, he just picked up an offer from Alabama at his junior day visit. So all of a sudden now, Georgia being that major program in his backyard that's offered him, got a little bit more competition there with the Tide. And obviously there's a lot of ties there between some of his father's former teammates in Green Bay that went on to play that played at Alabama at the same time. So that's something interesting, and that's something to monitor. You see a lot of other names. I think Gouda was also at Alabama this past weekend. That's somebody that I think anybody and everybody visited Joaquin Gouda over the January visitation period. Justin Weeks came out of his visit to Athens this weekend, just still getting those good juju type feelings about the University of Georgia. And Gilbert, I think he falls a little bit, not just because of, him telling me how much he loves the things in place at Clemson and Alabama, but I think really I've determined, it sounds to me like there's a new name or an old name that definitely kind of deserves the nod here as Georgia's number one cornerback target outside of Dante Wright in this class.
All right, and so I'm assuming that guy's going to be in our top 5, and that's Jaden Aparico-Bailey out of Montgomery, Alabama. I'm assuming that's who you're referring to?
Yeah, they call him Jab. I love that because that's sometimes when a cornerback tries to strike a receiver off the line of scrimmage and prevent a free release, you do that jab punch right there. And Jaden Aparicio-Bailey out of Montgomery, Alabama, he was a guy that it sounds to me like Georgia is just foaming at the mouth to add him to the class. Jaden told me after his visit this past weekend that Georgia is his leader. They deserve to be that leader, and they're right up at the top in terms of everything that he's ever looking for for and the ideal fit. Obviously, the relationship there with Dante Williams is something, but apparently the way Kirby Smart swaddled his baby brother, that was I know Kirby had to knock off some rust because it's been a while since he was rocking babies, but apparently he did enough to keep the young man quiet while he was sleeping. So there's really a lot of love right now between Jaden Aparicio-Bailey and his family and the dogs right now.
All right, so that's going to be it for Top Targets, and that's going to be it for today's episode of Before the Hedges. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you right back here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Let's go.